To the Patriots Beat podcast here on the CLNS Media Podcast Network and on Patriots Press Pass. Saturday morning, early morning for us, day 3 of the NFL draft. We're going to talk about what the Patriots did on day 2, and we're going to start there. Then we'll get to the board on day 3. And Alex, you can go ahead and rib me for all the prospects I don't know that are going to get drafted today or whatever it was that you were going to say.
Well,
but
let me just say here before in 30 seconds in, it's overdue. A very happy Matariza Day to one and all, to all who celebrate, to Evan Lazar as well. Whether it's the Patriots, whether it's another team, Matariza will get drafted into the NFL today. That is a good feeling.
I thought there was a small outside chance he was going to get drafted yesterday, honestly.
I thought there was too.
End of third round, so one of those comp picks, right? I thought maybe that could have been Matariza territory. I don't expect him to last long today, honestly. I think his over-under on the books was 117.
117 and a half, yep.
Yeah, so I think I take the under, honestly. I think he goes early today. I think teams are going to look at it as generational talent. I do. I'm with you on Matariza. We can talk about the punters here in a second, but let's start with what the Patriots did yesterday. And I think the biggest hesitation, and I don't think this is necessarily even fair. I just think that this is how I would gather the general fan base is feeling about the Patriots draft so far. And that is last year, they go Mac Jones, Christian Barmore, Ronnie Perkins, Ramondre Stevenson. They go brand names, right? Alabama,
Stevenson was day 2, but yeah.
Oklahoma, right?
Day 3, yeah.
They went with big Power 5 national championship pedigree type of programs and prospects that were projected to go in those ranges, guys that were even fallers with Barmore and Mac Jones. A lot of people thought they were going to go much higher in the draft. This year, it's been a totally different approach in terms of a guy from Chattanooga. Have they ever drafted a player from Baylor? Or is this the first one?
First since 2006, third under Belichick, 4th overall.
Yeah, so
and I believe the first offensive player, which that in a school like Baylor, that matters. Oddly enough, Baylor is always an offensive powerhouse. You normally don't think defense. And I know there's some guys in this draft, Jalen Peter, TJ Woods. You normally don't think defense when you think of a school like Baylor. So I know it's the first, the 2 guys Bill took were defensive players in 03 and 06. I forget who the third one was. I'm looking.
Right. So my point, and then Houston, right? University of Houston with Marcus Jones.
So I will say this about Houston.
Yeah.
We talked about this during a show leading up to the draft, that teams put a premium on these schools that go on runs in the class that sparked a run. Houston has been an relatively elite program for the last 4 years. They've been ranked. Yeah. They were in contention to make the college football playoff 2 years ago. They did have an undefeated year in there somewhere. They've been so good that they actually got invited to join the Big 12. And they'll be doing that, I think, in 2024, 2025. So obviously not a Power 5 program now, but there is a real case to be made. I know Cincinnati made the college football playoff last year, but over the last 4 years, independence aside, there's a real case to be made that Houston was the best group of 5 team in the country. So that's not nothing. That's they're as close to Power 5 as you can get without being Power 5.
Fair enough. So, but I think the point I'm trying to get at here, and I'll land the plane, is I understand that people have reservations about the names that the Patriots are selecting. Maybe not the positions, right? The fact is they needed a guard or an offensive lineman. They needed a wide receiver, and they needed a corner. And they got those 3 positions hit in the first 2 days of the draft. So I understand that some people are like, why these guys? Why Tyquan Thornton and not Sky Moore or George Pickens, and why Marcus Jones and not a corner earlier in the draft like Andrew Booth Jr. or Kaiir Elam or one of these players, right? But I actually am starting to come around to what they're doing in general and starting to come around to the talent that they're getting, even if it's not. It's a bunch of schools that are not Alabama. It's not Georgia. It's not Oklahoma. It's not these Power 5 blue blood programs, but I like the talent that they're getting. And I don't think that we should judge a book by its cover. That's essentially what I'm trying to say here, just because Cole Strange went to Chattanooga, doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be a bad prospect. Now, the one thing I will say about it that does give me a little bit of reservations is, and I get that it's worked out for them in the past. I know everybody points to Logan Mankins. Devin McCourty on Twitter, he pointed to the fact that he was a draft pick that people thought was a bad pick by Bill Belichick at the time. For the most part, though, in recent years, I feel like when they have gone more towards chalk and more towards the consensus board, that they're a little bit more, they have a better success rate with those picks, right? When they kind of go with their own sort of thing and they go off the beaten path a little bit, I get a little bit weary of what they're doing. But I am starting to come around on some of these players, and I'm not sure. I don't think you feel at all that way, but I think a lot of fans this morning are waking up after the first 2 days and saying, who the heck is Cole Strange? And we got a corner who's 5'8" from Houston, right? I mean, what are we doing here?
So some more school background here. I looked it up. They took a tackle from Baylor in 1999, the year before Bill got here, like late. They have actually taken 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 players now, including Strange from Chattanooga. They took Strange. They took one guy, Mario Greer, in 1996. They took all the other players in the 60s, including Charlie Long, who was like John Hanna before John Hanna. He was their best. He was one of their all-time great linemen before John Hanna showed up, right? Well, I guess he still is. But the idea being that they've hit. It was, 60 years ago, they've hit on a lineman from Chattanooga. The other thing I'd say in terms of the schools, and you know me, I'm really big into, let's dig in deep on that. And I like to frame the draft around that.
Right.
And yeah, this is the first time. Hang on, let me pull this up. I actually just did these numbers before we jumped on here. I didn't know we'd be talking about this, but I think it's a good conversation to have. So this is the third time in the last 10 years they didn't take at least one SEC player in the top 100. Now, there's other good conferences. I think, the Big Ten is right up there. I'd put, the Big 12 and the ACC kind of in the next tier. Third time they didn't take an ACC player in the top 100. Two of those 3 times since their next pick was an SEC player. They both happen to be Arkansas defensive linemen, Trey Flowers and Dietrich Wise. There's only 4 times under Bill they haven't taken an SEC player. So I would be surprised if they don't walk away with an SEC kid today. At the same time, what I would say is there is a weird thing here with COVID where and then the NIL stuff is factored in as well. None of their guys specifically, but it's a part of this. There have been a record number of transfers over the last few years. And so, for instance, Tyquan Thornton originally was committed to Florida. And I know that
kid.
Right. I know there's a history with Florida and they really haven't, people are going to bring up Duke Dawson or whoever. If they drafted a 4.28 1,000-yard receiver from Florida, we'd be losing our minds. If he's a 4.28 guy who put up 1,000 yards at Florida,
right,
he would have been a first-round pick, right? So the SEC schools saw the talent in him. I don't know why he transferred. That's not out there, but all 3 of these guys transferred. Marcus Jones went the other way. He started at Troy. He moved up to Houston, but like I said, I think Houston was the premier non-Power 5 program during his time there. Cole Strange started at Air Force Academy. So reading into the schools, as much as I love to do it, is becoming less and less relevant with the COVID and the NIL stuff and the 5th-year senior and all that. So again, I'd be shocked if they don't go SEC today at some point, but I'm not going to panic about it. Yeah, overall on the draft, I like it. I like it. And I kind of talked about
you're selling me on it a little bit more by the minute. Every time we talk, I feel like I'm a little bit more okay with what was happening. But like I said, I feel like when they go more towards the consensus like they did last year, they end up in a better place.
That's fair. Although Jones was like right on the consensus. Everybody's like 85 to 90, 85 to 90.
Yeah, no, Marcus Jones was the first pick of the draft that they had that I was like, right guy, right place, right? I mean, that was the first time I was all over that. I think the problem is Tyquan Thornton at 50, and I want to talk about Tyquan Thornton. I know we've talked a lot about kind of big picture here so far. Tyquan Thornton at 50 is not sniffing 50 overall until the combine, right?
Okay, but the combine happened. I heard that argument. But first off, the combine happened. He had a really good pro day as well. He had a
Yeah.
really good pro day. I would say with that, first off, there's those reports out there that the Patriots had to jump other teams to get him. Two of the teams they jumped were the Steelers and Chiefs. I
Yeah.
think
I think I
we all
lean
know the
more towards it
Steelers and
being,
Chiefs know how to identify
yeah.
wide receivers.
I'm leaning more towards it being Kansas City that was interested in him. Tyreek Hill, Nicole Hardman, like that's their type, right? Like they just
Bro,
want speed.
I'm just saying I've seen both of those teams.
Yeah.
Although
Yeah.
let's not act like the Steelers hate speed. They found Antonio Brown.
Yeah. Antonio
They
Brown
didn't
was sneaky speed though.
they
That's
didn't
not
draft
4.28.
him. They didn't draft him, but Darius Hayward-Bay was a bust until he got there, and then they kind of fixed him.
Right.
Right.
For a little
So,
bit there, yeah.
yeah, I think overall, and I talked about this yesterday, and I think this is a players aside, and I know that's kind of unfair to do because the draft is all about the players, but
Yes.
when you look at the Patriots approach, I like it. All floor on day one, all
Yeah.
ceiling on day two. I think that's the right way to draft. Now you can say, did they take the right floor guys? Did they take the right ceiling guys? We can have the debate. I would argue that you look at the receivers on the board, and I know people like Sky Moore, and I think if they were going for floor, Sky Moore is the guy. They also may have wanted the outside guy versus the slot. You got
I think
to
that
kind of
was what it
separate that.
ultimately came down to.
I think that's
Yeah.
part of it, but I know people like George Pickens, right? I'm trying to think of who the other top receivers were on the board at that point, but did any of them have the ceiling that Tyquan Thornton does? That's tough to say. 6'2", 428 with his body control. That guy, if he figures it out, that's a perennial 1,000-yard receiver. I mean, that's bigger. The comp I love for him is like slightly bigger Brandon Cooks. So
yeah, Alex Pierce was another one if they wanted that outside. I think it came down to two things though. And number one, Matt Groh could not have been more clear in his press conference last night when we spoke to him at around 12:15 at night after the third round, excuse me. Speed. They wanted speed. And I think they looked at Sky Moore, Alec Pierce, George Pickens, and they said, okay, those guys got good speed for their size, right? Especially Pierce and Pickens. Low 4.4s at 200 pounds, 6'2", 6'3". That's good speed for their size. But we drafted a few years ago a guy that had good speed for his size in N'Keal Harry, and it didn't translate.
Yeah, but that wasn't N'Keal. That was relative speed. This guy is legitimately
No.
fast.
What I'm saying is that I don't think that they went the Pickens Pierce route.
Because I got you. Okay, I'm sorry.
I think that they saw too much overlap there about the mistake that they made last time around at that position. So I think the first thing that they wanted to do was, if we're going to draft a receiver early, we're going to make sure this guy absolutely flies. Like we're not gonna get mixed up in the 4.45 guy at 200 pounds, right? We're gonna get the guy that ran a 4.28 and put up the fastest time in the 40-yard dash at the combine a couple months ago. Full stop. And I also wonder, I had heard some rumblings that they like Jahan Dotson. I wonder if a guy like Christian Watson was maybe on their board. Right. I think they wanted.
I feel like if Thornton was, Watson has to be.
Right. They wanted legitimate down the field speed. They wanted it to translate on tape, and they wanted it to translate on the 40 times as well in the athletic testing. I think the reason why they didn't lean more towards Sky Moore is what you pointed at was, I think they feel really good about Kendrick Bourne and Jacoby Myers playing in the slot. I think they feel like they have two guys that they feel comfortable with in the slot. And if they're going to go slot receiver later on in the draft, I think they're maybe gravitating more towards the Edelman, Welker, Amendola mold of like the jitterbug slot, right? Not necessarily the vertical slot like a Sky Moore is. So I don't think they were looking inside receiver. I think they were looking outside receiver. And this follows suit with pretty much everything that they've done all offseason at that position, acquiring Devontae Parker, being in on Robbie Anderson, who I think in terms of measurables and how they're built and stuff like that, Robbie Anderson's a really good comp for Tyquan Thornton. And 6'2", 187 versus 6'2", 181.
People get pissed when you do that. Don't forget Robbie Anderson's only played with bad quarterbacks. Robbie Anderson's a good receiver.
Yeah, 2 years ago when he played with was it Teddy B, right? In Carolina. He had 1,000 yards.
Yeah.
Right. So they almost traded for Tyquan Thornton essentially in Robbie Anderson, right, a couple months ago. So I think that they have been in that X mold with speed. And I texted a Patriots source last night after they made the pick, and he said 3 things to me about Tyquan Thornton. Speed, obviously, kid's fast. We know that.
Yep.
Toughness. They really like his ability to fight for the football,
He's
his
a
ability
gamer.
to fight through contact. I dare say blocking. I don't want to make people think that they drafted another blocking receiver, because that's obviously not the case. But the kid will block. And the last thing he told me was ball skills and his body control, his ability to track the deep ball down the field, and his hands. He only had 5 drops last year on over 100 targets. So he's got that blend of speed, toughness, ball skills down the field. And when you watch his release game, he can release off the line of scrimmage. This is not somebody like N'Keal Harry, who is a stiff, linear athlete. This is somebody that can move laterally, can burst off the line of scrimmage, and can create separation with his releases and get the inside or outside track by getting the corner off his spot and moving the corner at the line of scrimmage. That's probably the most exciting thing that I see about Tyquan Thornton on tape, is his ability to release at the line of scrimmage. He has legitimate release quickness, and that's something that they currently don't have. I think he already comes in on day one and has probably the most explosive release of anybody on the roster. And that's exciting. Now we'll see how they use him. If they pigeonhole him to like a Nelson Aguilar role where all he's doing is stretching the field, then I don't know if he'll have the production of the 50th pick in draft. But I think if they expand that role a little bit and it looks more like how they used Brandon Cooks in 2017, and that I think is ultimately what they're hoping is going to be the upside here, then I think that it's going to be really a player that they're going to like a whole lot, and we're going to like a whole lot. So I posted some clips of him on Twitter already. I wrote about it. You can see I really tried to focus on the release package that he has, because I think that that's where it all starts for those types of receivers. If you can't release the line of scrimmage and you can't get off press coverage as a vertical threat, then it doesn't matter if you run 4.28. You're just not going to get down the field.
So here's where I'm at with Thornton, and I really like the pick, and people are going to come at me for being too positive. Oh, you liked all of them. I was a little critical of Cole Strange yesterday. I really like this pick. I do. I think the draftnetwork.com, this is Keith Sanchez in particular. I think everybody over there does a fantastic job.
Yeah.
These are the 3, well, it's 6 words, but three concepts just listed at the top of his scouting report. And Evan, you touched on them. Separation, ball skills, big playability.
Yeah.
Isn't that what we've been begging for?
Right.
Isn't that everything we've been begging for? And the speed too, right? We were sold Nelson Aguilar as this burner, as the guy who's going to finally put some speed in this offense. Nelson Aguilar is a 4.44 guy.
Yeah.
Thornton again is 4.28. Top.
That's what I'm saying. I think that's why they were. Yeah, they were all out on Pierce and on Pickens and Moore and all those guys, because they wanted track speed.
Yeah, this guy isn't. The Patriots haven't had this kind of speed in a while.
Yeah,
at least since Brandon Cooks.
Yeah,
at least, and I don't have Brandon Cooks' 40 in front of me, but it was very good.
Yeah, he ran. Here, I'll pull it up. He ran 4.33. So this kid was faster.
This guy is faster. Okay, I mean, you're going back to, and I mean, these guys didn't pan out, but I think Thornton's a better player than them. Kelly Washington, Bethel Johnson, like that kind of speed.
He's faster than Bethel too.
Is he faster than Bethel? I love it.
Dorsett was also a 4.33.
Dorsett. Okay, so Dorsett, yeah. The thing with Tyquan Thornton to me, and here's why I love this pick, and this is kind of an elementary way to go about it, but I don't really care. If you're a Seinfeld fan, the episode, I think I texted you about this.
Yeah.
The episode where George decides to just go against all his instincts. So George is this character in the show Seinfeld who's like this total loser, right? Everything always goes wrong for him. And one day he decides, well, if every decision I make is the wrong decision, then I should just totally go against my instincts. And he starts doing it. His life starts going amazing. He gets a new job. He's dating a model, etc.
Right.
So Tyquan Thornton, to me, that's what the Patriots did with this pick. Well, we haven't hit on a receiver for years. So let's just go against everything we've based our receiver evaluation on. And then maybe they'll get the hit, right? Tyquan Thornton is everything the Patriots have refused to draft for the last 20 years at the wide receiver position. And that's why I'm excited about it. I'm not saying that, he's definitely going to hit, but they didn't do the same thing again and again. It's not the same thing. It's not like,
Right.
I think even some people knew with Nikhil, like, this isn't going to work, right?
Right.
This isn't their
If they
guy.
had drafted Treylon Burks, then that's the same thing, right? If they had, I would say, even to a degree, if they had drafted a guy like George Pickens, I think George Pickens is much faster than N'Keal Harry, but it's still that big outside receiver who's got weight translated speed.
Right. There's also there's the injury concerns. That feels like Malcolm Mitchell-ish, Chad Jackson-ish. They needed speed on offense. They needed size and speed on offense.
Yeah.
They got size and speed on offense. Like, I know that's too simplistic. It's really not. That's what the draft is.
Yeah.
That's what it is. They needed size and speed. They got size and speed. He was the fastest capable receiver on the board.
Yeah.
I like the pick. I really, really do. And then I and it's a rare combination. It's not just the speed. It's the rare combination of size, speed, and body control. Like, he's not a great route runner. Hopefully they figure it out this time. And we've had, I don't remember who it is, but we had some guy in the comments who comes on here all the time and talks about the Patriots. It's not going to be, now that McDaniels is gone, it's not going to be the Patriots offense. They're going to run Mac Jones's Alabama offense.
Right.
And there's been some indications of that this offseason. They're moving away from the fullback, getting more athletic at the guard position. If that's the case, then you don't need Tyquan Thornton to be a great route runner. Slants and goes. Slants, fades, and goes. And he can do that. That's what he can do. So if they put him in that
I'm also going to be clamoring all season long for him to be running deep crossing routes too. I just think that's the easiest way, in my opinion, now. Deep overs, that the Kansas City Chiefs made deep overs cool, right? Tyreek Hill going across the field on the deep over route is what made that take off in the entire NFL. And I look at Thornton and I see that ability as well. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just saying that, like, I don't think he needs to run all these double moves and all these complicated routes, like one cut routes. You can have him just run one cut routes and he will be productive in that role. I really like the pick. And then the other thing is, too, this frees up. I don't know that they'll do it now because I think you got to see where he's at camp. This frees up them to maybe move Nelson Aguilar. They're a little redundant. If Thornton's still a year away, like, again, I wouldn't do it now. If Thornton's still a year away, you do the red shirt. But if Thornton comes out and he's lighting it up in camp, then you can maybe move Nelson Aguilar. I think you get something for him. Maybe you get like a decent corner. Maybe you get another offensive lineman. Maybe you might be able to get a top 150 pick for him next year. So I think that's a good move.
From a roster building standpoint, Devontae Parker in, N'Keal Harry out.
Right.
Tyquan Thornton in, Nelson Aguilar out.
And remember, Aguilar's in a contract year too, so he's out.
That's sort of the 2-year plan. I'm not sure if that will all happen this offseason or this year, but I think in 2023, you're going to see Tyquan Thornton in the Aguilar role, and you're going to see Parker in the Harry role. I think Parker will already be in the Harry role. I'm just not sure Thornton will be. So
the one other thing I'd say about Thornton to kind of calm Patriots fans down is in regards to his projected draft stock, he didn't have great production. His production was pretty up and down.
Yeah.
And this goes back to the college thing. Baylor's program has pretty much been a dumpster fire since 2017. Not necessarily, they've had some good teams, but there's been massive coaching staff turnover. There's been turnover higher up at the school. It all goes back to the Art Briles scandal and all of that.
Right.
But Baylor has been a really difficult place to consistently play football. There's been a record number of guys transfer out of there. There's been a lot of moving pieces. I think they've had 3 starting quarterbacks in 3 years. So
his quarterback play, by the way, last year, some of the tape that you watch on him, the amount of times that he has to adjust to the football down the field, it was terrible. So that was the big thing that they really liked about him too, is his ability to adjust and finish at the catch point.
His catch radius. With the body control, his catch radius is massive. And then, I mean, his size too. He's a big guy. The point being, again, he comes out last year as a career year, 1,000 yards, 10 touchdowns, and I think it was 13 games. Meanwhile, all of the top receivers in this draft, outside of maybe Christian Watson, as good as this class was in terms of talent, there was great sustained production. guys who were good for multiple years, right? Evan, we were texting about Chris Olave as a first-round pick in this draft in 2019.
Right.
So when you have all these guys who've been good for 3 or 4 years, I think Thornton, based on his production in 2021, probably is, I don't know, 50 on the consensus boards, but he's in the top 100.
Right.
I think
I had him at the top 100 guy. I know a lot of other boards had him at like 155.
Okay.
But you just don't get, 428 doesn't get out of day 2.
Right. Exactly.
It just doesn't. Unless you're just completely so raw that all you literally can do and you have no production in college, but you ran really fast in the 40. The guy that stands out to me that I think was an even more ridiculous reach on day 2 because of his 40 time was Anthony Schwartz from Auburn, who is also a track guy.
Yeah, I remember that.
He ran like 4.27 and ended up sneaking into the top 100. So as soon as Tyquan Thornton put down a 4.28 at the combine, I had him in my top 100. The NFL does not allow that kind of speed to get out of day 2.
And again, it's so he only played 5 games in 2020. The COVID screwed him up with the schedule and all that. Again, if he puts up, so he had in 2019, right? He had, I think, 700 yards. He had a pretty good year. If you flip his 2019 and 2020, he's right. I mean, it would still be considered a reach, but not significantly. It'd be like, oh, they could have, they wouldn't have gotten him at 85. They would not have gotten him at 85 if he puts up, if you flip his 2019 and 2020 season. So there's some weird reasons he wasn't projected to go as high as he was. And this is kind of what we've talked about, right? Throughout it. A big reason Cole Strange was projected so low is he's 24. It's just, it doesn't seem like something the Patriots care about. It doesn't. They're interested in the 5-year window. They don't care that he might retire in 7 years. And whether you like that or not, that's fine. It has nothing to do with him as a football player coming in year 1. Tyquan Thornton, I don't think they care about the knocks. I just don't think they're relevant to what the organization values. Again, whether you think that's right or wrong, this isn't a defense. But I'm just saying, I don't, the inconsistent production and the less than developed route tree, I believe it or not, I don't think the Patriots care about that. I don't. I think they're fine with it. I think they found a guy's 4.28 where they put the ball in his hands. They have him run down the field. He's going to run away from people. Matt Groh said it. If you want speed, you have to draft speed. And by the way, I loved how fiery Matt Groh was last night. They're not wishy-washy on these picks. They truly believe in these kids. And that, I don't know that that's been true for all of their draft picks. And what I mean when I say that is they've drafted guys that never really given them a shot over the last few years. They've buried a lot of their picks.
Yeah.
Matt grows into these guys. He believes they're football players. He believes they're playmakers. These guys are going to get a shot. These guys have people fighting for them in the building. That means something.
Yeah. So Tyquan Thornton, 50th overall pick. I'll wrap it up on Thornton on this. I think the number one word that I have heard in New England and around the Patriots when it comes to their receiver play, pass catchers in general is separation. Everybody is clamoring for guys that can actually separate. And when you watch Tyquan Thornton on tape, you see a lot of separation. This guy gets
the word at the top of his scouting report.
Yeah, and that I think is something that people can get on board with. The route tree is limited. The technique is limited. This is not somebody that's going to get open at the top of the route and run a really nuanced break and Julian Edelman, Wes Welker, quickness or anything like that, right? Different type of cat. But separation down the field is separation down the field, and he can still do that. So I think that that's exciting for people. All right, let's move on to the 85th overall pick in the draft for the Patriots, Marcus Jones from Houston. I get he's 5'8". That's going to give people some pause, but this kid is electric. Electric nickel slot corner and electric punt returner and kick returner. Everything that he does is fast. Everything he does is explosive. And I truly think when I watch him play a corner, I really think that he's got the speed and the foot quickness to play a full-time slot role in the NFL and be somebody that could potentially shadow a Tyreek Hill, shadow a Jalen Waddle, run across the field with Isaiah McKenzie. I think that you have a much faster and more explosive player than, let's say, like a Miles Bryant, who's also undersized, but doesn't run nearly as well as somebody like Marcus Jones does.
Yeah, I love it. And I already see it in the chat, Marcus Jones being compared to Cyrus Jones. First off, he he's not afraid of contact. Cyrus Jones didn't want to hit anybody, and he didn't want to get hit as a returner.
Yeah.
That's not Marcus Jones' game at all.
No.
This dude, you imagine it. If 5'8", 174, people are worried about the size, he'll get up to buck 85 once he gets in that weight room. But this dude loves to hit. So I'm not worried about that. The other difference with Cyrus Jones is I think Marcus Jones is more aggressive. I think Cyrus Jones got here and was a little afraid of getting beat. I think he played everything very safe. I think he was more afraid of, he played to not lose. He didn't play to win. Marcus Jones, a baller, dude. Marcus Jones, that when the football's in the air, it's his ball. It's his ball. He plays corner like a wide receiver. I think he's a great pick. Of the 3 picks, like I just raved about Tyquan Thornton. I don't necessarily mean, he's with Thornton. When I say I like the pick, I don't mean it in, I think they hit on a wide receiver. I think it's 50-50 whether or not he pans out. But he's the kind of guy that you take that shot on. He's a great guy to take a 50-50 shot on.
Yeah.
Marcus Jones, I think they have a player here. Marcus Jones, I think, is a baller. He's somebody just said in the chat, Jonathan Jones in a contract here. That's an excellent point. I think Marcus Jones is the next guy, right? I think he's the next guy at the position. You don't use the term ball hawk a lot with slot corners. Yeah. It's just not a position that lends itself to that style of play. Marcus Jones kind of makes it work, though. He can kind of do, there's a little bit, and this is a really rough comparison, so don't roll your eyes at me too hard. Oh, no. There's a little Asante Samuel in his game in that he can bait the quarterback.
Asante wasn't huge. Like, Asante wasn't a big guy. He's obviously bigger than 5'8", but
just because he's a different position, right? Asante was an outside corner through and through, but it's the same thing where I think he's got a really good understanding of what the quarterback's looking at, what the team is trying to do on the other side of the ball, and read it and get himself in the right position to make the play, right? Asante, the T-step, right, is what that's called, the T-step. That was legendary. Asante Samuel, where he looks like he's out of position, puts his foot in the ground, cuts in. There's like 3 or 4 of those picks on Marcus Jones tape.
Asante Samuel made Bill Belichick a believer in the T-step. Bill doesn't like the T-step. It's a gamble, right? It's hit or miss. You're either picking it off or you're getting beat for a touchdown. There's no in between with the T-step.
And you don't, again, playing in the slot doesn't necessarily lend itself to being able to do that.
Yeah.
But Marcus Jones apparently had it figured out in college. We'll see if it carries over to the pros.
Well, he played everywhere in college. He played outside. He played slot. He played a little bit of safety. We obviously know, I'm sure people that have read up on him.
There's one last night. I was watching last night. I think it was against TCU. I can't remember. He's playing the slot against against a Power 5 school. He goes T-step from the slot, picks it off, hurdles an offensive lineman on his way to a pick six. I think that single play is like the epitome of what Marcus Jones is, because then there's the kick return element. And I'm going to try not to get my hopes up. And I honestly hate these comparisons because nobody should be compared to these two players. Yeah. I've seen, and these are from like reputable Lance Zierlein, NFL.com, Dante Hall comparison as a returner. The Draft Network had Devin Hester. Those are the 2 greatest returners of all time. That's the greatest career returner. And the guy who at his peak was the single best kick returner in the history of the game.
Yeah.
That I'm not going to come out here and say he's either of those guys, but even Gunner, he was coming from D2, right? And who are the other guys they've brought in that were like hailed as returners? They weren't.
So
they haven't had this kind of returner in a while.
The name that Jim Nagy, the director of the Senior Bowl, threw out, which is going obviously a back a ways in terms of draft and all that kind of stuff. But he mentioned Troy Brown as an interesting one because Troy Brown came into the league, obviously more gravitated towards wide receiver, of course, not corner. But Troy Brown came in with this ability, like Marcus Jones, to play in 3 phases. Marcus Jones has wide receiver tape at Houston. Now, he's not
10
a wide
catches,
receiver.
100 yards.
Yeah, he's not a wide receiver. I think maybe, the Bears, I threw this out last night. Chicago, they used to use Devin Hester on like end arounds and stuff like that occasionally to get him on the field and get the football in his hands on offense. Is there a world where the Patriots need big plays on offense and they're trying to search for it? I suppose, but I think with Tyquan Thornton in the mix, Devontae Parker in the mix, they got enough actual receivers that they don't.
Lance Zierlein said they might have a package.
Okay, maybe they have a package.
Here's the difference. Those guys, no, it'd be a package thing. It'd be a couple times a year.
Right.
But those guys are outside. receivers.
Yes.
If Marcus Jones is playing receiver, he's going to be in the slot. He'd be their fastest slot receiver. If we want to believe,
no, stop.
If,
To me,
I'm just
this
saying, if we
is
want to believe the Devin Hester comp, that's what Devin Hester did. He was a corner, and they started playing him at receiver because they're like, hey, he's good with the ball in his hands. Let's make this work.
To me, it's a lot like Troy Brown used to play corner. Julian Edelman used to play corner, right? It's sort of like that. If there's a bunch of injuries at the position and they absolutely need to move somebody and make it work, he's a slot corner. I think he's a legitimate slot corner. I like Troy Brown's comparison because Troy Brown coming into the league was exclusively a kick and punt returner for the first couple years of his career, right? Kind of like Edelman when Welker was still here and Edelman was behind Welker. So that's kind of the comparison there in terms of the return ability and where his early role on the Patriots might be. But I truly believe that he will be a nickel or a slot corner here not before long. He's better than Miles Bryant. He's an upgrade over Miles Bryant.
Faster.
Behind Jonathan Jones for now. And then we'll see how Jonathan Jones ages over the next couple of years and if they're going to reach another extension with Jonathan Jones or if he's going to be around. And if not, then they transition it to Marcus Jones. And I think that he has that ability. The other word that I would kind of getting into more of his coverage ability, because we talked a lot about the return skill. Sticky. I would use the word sticky for him in coverage. He has that ability to play man-to-man, to mirror guys, to stay in the hip pocket, to play that trail technique with the single high safety and run with people all over the field. And he's right in your shirt all the time. He's really a difficult guy to get away from. And he didn't run the 40. He didn't test because he had off-season shoulder surgery that he said last night that he's going to be a full go for training camp. Most scouts, most people that I've spoken with think that he might have broken 4.4 if he had ran the 40-yard dash at the combine. Yeah. The low end is in the low 4.4s. The high end was I heard was 4.37, 4.38 potentially. So he can fly. He's not Jonathan Jones fast. I think Jonathan Jones was maybe even in the 4.2s or something like that coming out. But he's got enough speed there to play inside. Yeah,
Jonathan Jones was 4.28. Jonathan Jones ran
Tyquan Thornton.
Tyquan Thornton's 40. Wow, I didn't realize he ran that fast. And
he's every year when you talk to the players on the Patriots about who are the guys winning the races in practice and who are the fastest guys, Jonathan Jones is always right up there. So I look at Marcus Jones and this is my favorite pick of the draft so far for the Patriots. I think this one made sense when they did it. You see the role that he's going to play. You see the fit in terms of the actual makeup of the player, right? The attitude, the work ethic, the dog in him that he plays with out on the field. I love the return ability. Reality is, and we talked about this too. We talked about it a little bit with receivers. We talked about it when we hyped up Marcus Jones on the podcast before. Gunner is no longer here. The Patriots need to replace Gunner as a punt returner. He also obviously returned kicks a lot of the times for the Patriots as well. They needed another return man. And whether they wanted to put Kyle Duggar back there, I know Jacoby Myers has some history back there. Matt Groh mentioned something interesting last night. I don't think he was necessarily referring to returns, but I think they believe that Tyquan Thornton might actually be like a great gunner or something like that for them as well. So I think that he's another guy that I think is going to play in the kicking game too.
So here's what I'd say about, I actually had this conversation with somebody last night. It's an interesting one. In terms of Tyquan Thornton returning kicks, he was used a little bit as a kick returner as a freshman.
Yeah, I could definitely see kickoffs for sure.
Well, so then what happened, and this is a guy I love and I'd love to see him take today, then Treston Ebner shows up, who, if you haven't been watching the show, is one of my favorite players on day 3 in this draft. He's a pass-catching running back. He's also a 2-time Big 12 Special Teams Player of the Year as a kick returner. He was one of the best kick returners I think he was actually second to Marcus Jones for the Returner of the Year award. That's National Kick Returner of the Year award this year. So they just weren't going to have Tyquan Thornton return kicks. I think he could be good at it. They just had a guy who was elite at it, so he wasn't going to do it. I wouldn't be surprised. And the gunner thing makes sense too. He's got to bulk up a little bit to do that.
Yeah.
That's where I'd be a little surprised.
But you see the release and you see the speed. I mean, everybody was goo goo gaga over Jamison Williams' gunner tape, and for good reason. I mean, he was a fantastic gunner at Alabama. I see a similar similar everything about Tyquan Thornton in that regard too. So I think that
But
he could be
I
a
could see him
runner.
returning. I could see them giving a shot returning kicks too. But I don't know. Now that you have Marcus
Absolutely.
Jones, I think you lock Marcus Jones into that role.
So I think Marcus Jones is easily locked into the punt returner role, but on kickoffs, you do want a little bit more straight line speed potentially.
But here's the thing: he was a better kick returner than punt returner at Houston.
Okay. So
They could do
it's gonna be
something
good.
too where, and they've done this in the past. It used to be every team does this. There's very few teams that do it now. The Patriots still, they haven't done it in a couple of years, but they haven't had the personnel. They could go too deep and basically say, pick your poison. Kick it
Yeah.
to the faster guy or kick it to the more agile guy. Who do you want to return the kick? They could put them both back there. They
Yeah.
used to do that with the last time they did that, I think was 2020. They did that with Duggar and Gunner. They put them
Yeah.
both back and made teams pick.
Yeah. So I really love Marcus Jones. We've been hyping up Marcus Jones on the pod
Yeah.
for
Oh, yeah.
months. So
No,
he's a
he
player
is.
that if you guys have listened to us, and we were really excited about this one. Alex was all over Tyquan Thornton. I wasn't sold on Tyquan Thornton, to be honest.
Before the combine.
I kind of thought that Tyquan Thornton was a little bit of a product of the combine. I'm not gonna lie. I've watched some more tape on him. I've dug more in, and I'm willing to give the guy more of a chance than I was before. I'll say that. I'm still not 100% sold. He's gonna have to prove it to me, but I like him a lot more than I thought I would. You know,
So,
now
again,
that I've really combed through it.
here's me selling Tyquan Thornton, and I don't mean this as a guarantee that he's going to pan out. I don't think that's a guarantee. There's a lot of ifs with him, but
Yeah,
day 2 of the draft is about upside. They have sucked with drafting upside receivers the last few years. In terms of outside receivers, Sky Moore is the one. If you want to say they should have taken Sky Moore, that is a fair conversation to have.
right.
I mean, outside of Sky Moore, though, in terms of upside, like somebody just brought this up in the chat. It's an interesting point. They met with him 3 times. Romeo Dubs. Would you rather Tyquan Thornton or Romeo Dubs?
Tyquan Thornton, absolutely.
I'd rather Tyquan. I think Romeo Dubs is the safe. He's going to be a 3rd or 4th wide receiver when he comes in,
Right.
and he's going to be a 3rd or 4th wide receiver at the end of his rookie contract. He's going to be like a 30 catch a year guy. That's what he's going to be. And I'm good on that. I'm good with that guy. I don't need them to take that guy. They need a playmaker. They need a game breaker. I don't know. I'm not saying you for sure Tyquan Thornton's going to be that guy, but I'm saying of the guys on the board,
Yeah.
he has as good or better of a chance to be that guy. I like the Mecole Hardman pick. I don't know that he's like a 1. I don't know that he's a guy you build around, but if you get that guy, Tyquan Thornton's going to be really good in one-on-one coverage. And they've addressed a lot of other needs in this draft. I think next year when Nelson Aguilar's off the books, when Jacoby Myers off the books, when N'Keal Harry's not here, next year we go back to talking about that wide receiver in the first round. I know I've pushed back on that the last 2 years, right? Last year I said it's not the year. They have too many other needs. I know I said this year the board doesn't work that way, etc. Next year is the year. And if they can go like Bourne and Thornton are really, really, really good 2 and 3.
Yeah.
Could be a really good 2 and 3. And they're building it backwards. It's annoying. It's annoying they're building it backwards. I get that.
Yeah.
I like the picture they're painting at the position. I really do. And I will say too, were you about to throw it into talking about today?
Yeah.
I got one more point on yesterday I want to make.
Bottom line on Tyquan Thornton to me
Yeah.
is they did not want to mess around with the speed. They
needed speed.
They didn't want, everybody's a why not Alec Pierce? Why not George Pickens? Why not Sky Moore?
Right.
Because they didn't want anybody that ran over a 4.4. They wanted somebody that had track level, Olympic level speed. Somebody that runs an Olympic level 100 meter. Like that's what they wanted here. And that's what they got with Tyquan Thornton. Sky Moore, too, for the last time, because I've seen his name pop up in the chat a whole bunch. I think Sky Moore is too much of a slot. I think they feel good about their slot guys. I think Kendrick Bourne and Jacoby Myers inside, they feel good about that. Nelson Aguilar, Tyquan Thornton might have some room to play like a speed slot inside, too, on some verticals from inside also. So I don't think that they were looking for a pure slot early in the draft. Maybe they come back to it. Maybe Kyle Phillips today or somebody like that.
If they want the speed
still on the board.
If they want to keep going speed, Bo Melton, Khalil Shakir, great comment in the chat. They got speed.
Yes, exactly.
I think slot's a bigger need than you're letting on. I don't know that Bourne is a true slot. I think they need a true slot. And Jacoby Myers in a contract year, and I think he's going to get paid next year. So they do need somebody there. I love them doubling up at receiver and taking a slot guy today. And the two guys I really like for them are Khalil Shakir and Bo Melton. If they can get one of those guys, that would be pretty freaking cool. One other thing, if I can, on day 2.
Yes.
Love the trade. Love the trade back with Panthers. That third round pick next year, that's going to be a top 70 pick. The Panthers are going to blow. I'm sorry, Matt Corral. I thought he was, I know a lot of people thought he might go in the first round. I thought he was borderline draftable. I really don't see it. I don't see it at all with this kid. Maybe they get Baker. I guess there's some news that they could get Baker today, but still, that's going to be a top 70, 75 pick. They essentially got paid to move up 20 spots. They just punted it a year. And if they hate this draft, like some people think they do, some people think they have this entire class rated incredibly low, and that's why they're so off on the consensus board. If that's the case, I'll take that top 75 pick next year, top 70 pick next year, whatever.
And you also traded the pick for
trade.
Devontae Parker, your own third round pick next year for Devontae Parker. So now the Patriots are going to have 4 picks because they're going to get the comp pick for JC Jackson at the end of the third round. So they're going to have 4 picks in the first 3 rounds at least next year by adding this pick back. Well, I love both. Honestly, I love both trades that they've made so far. The trade back in the first round was a good trade, and the trade that they made yesterday with Carolina was a good trade. So I think that they've hit the trades on the head there. I think they've done a good job with that. Okay, let's talk about today. We mentioned a few receivers. You mentioned Bo Melton. You mentioned Khalil Shakir. I'm not the biggest Kyle Phillips fan, honestly, but because they already drafted Tyquan Thornton and they already drafted the speed on the outside and the guy that has that true ceiling to be a legitimate number 1 in an offense, I think that a guy like Kyle Phillips makes a lot of sense because of his shiftiness, and he's more in that Amendola, Edelman, Welker slot mold, right? He's a guy that wins in the first 10 yards of the route. He's not somebody that's going to win down the field, but they already drafted the down the field guy. So I look at it and I say, if they bring me Kyle Phillips now and today somewhere, I actually really like that pairing with Tyquan Thornton for the next 4 to 5 years. You got your Welker and you got your outside guy in Tyquan Thornton. I think that that's a nice direction for them. There's 8 guys remaining on my big board that have not been drafted. I'm actually extremely shocked that Perion Winfrey is still on the board.
Very. I thought he was going to go top 50.
Yeah, he's a guy that I think is going to be on their radar. Senior Bowl MVP. Everybody talking about why didn't the Patriots draft Travis Jones from UConn, the nose tackle that had a great Senior Bowl week. They could still get back into that Senior Bowl thing. I think Tyquan Thornton was a Senior Bowl guy too, right? Because Strange was a Senior Bowl goal. He was a Shrine Bowl guy. Okay, I knew he was one of the postseason bowl game type things.
Right.
Okay, so Perion Winfrey still on the board. We both love Zion McCollum and Tyreek Woolen, right? The upside corners. We talked about double dipping on wide receiver. I think it makes a lot of sense to double dip at corner as well because you got the slot guy in Marcus Jones. You got the inside player. It would make a lot of sense for them to draft a developmental outside corner. I mentioned Woolen. I mentioned McCollum. The Bama guys are still there too. Josh Jobe and Jalen Amore Davis. I think both those guys are fits for the Patriots. So that is kind of my
I throw a Caleb Evans in there too from Missouri.
Yeah, he's a good player as well. Running back, certainly going to be talking about running backs here today for the Patriots as a potential
big name on the board.
Which one?
At running back, Isaiah Spiller. Isaiah Spiller is the best back in this class.
Yeah, his speed, his 40 time, and his long speed is what's hurting him, right? He doesn't have great straight line speed. Tyler Batty's still there, right? For sure.
Tyler Beatty is still there. Preston Ebner's still there. You like Kyron Williams is still there.
Yeah, if they really think that the running back that they draft here today needs to potentially play in year 1, especially in the passing game, Kyron Williams is the cleanest prospect in that regard, right? He's the guy that can step in with the pass protection skills and the blitz pickup skill and be able to pass protect already as a rookie, which is very hard to do in the Patriots system. So I think that's a big one as well. I like the guy from Chandler from UNC. I think he's got some dual threat ability to him as well. I think he can catch the football. We obviously have our guy Hassan Haskins from Michigan.
Haskins, yep. So they met with the other UNC back, by the way, whose name is escaping me. But yeah.
Okay. So maybe that program is, Michael Carter. Like that's a good running back program. Yep. They've produced some really good backs there over the last couple of years. Anybody else I didn't mention? We can talk about the punters here briefly if you want to talk punters. But who's the guy that I want to phrase it like this? Who's the guy that you want to see them come away with today on day 3? Like, who's your guy on day 3 for them?
So I gotta, because they go in so many different ways the way the sport's fallen. Like I'd love it if they got Perry on Winfrey.
Yeah.
I'd love it if they got Woolen, McCollum, or Armour Davis. I'm going through because I wrote this last night. Give me Bo Meltner, Khalil Shakir. Or honestly, if they want to wait a little later, I love the idea of pairing the slot receiver. If they don't want to do that right away, Samori Toure of Nebraska is a guy who hasn't gotten talked a lot about.
Yeah.
Man, if they take Isaiah Spiller, I love Tyler Beatty. I really do as a third down back. I didn't think they'd have a shot at Isaiah Spiller. I didn't.
Yeah.
And he's not a third down back. He's a 3 down back. And look, he is actually, I don't want, it's a different running style, but in terms of the makeup, he's kind of similar to Ramondre Stevenson, who they took 120 last year. They have 121 and 127 coming up today. The one other position I'd like to see them hit on, they took Cole Strange. They took care of the immediate need at guard.
Developmental tackle.
The long-term need to tackle. Daniel Falele is still there. I know that's right tackle, not left tackle, but he's a really interesting pick. And then, so if we're talking early here, because there's later picks, Marquand McCall, defensive tackle.
Right.
Excuse me. Let's get in the weeds, Evan. Let's do this.
Okay.
Backup quarterback.
So I'm going to continue to pound the table for Zion McCollum.
Okay. Well, no. Before we get, okay, you do that, and then there's two more.
Let me do this is my guy on day 3. I gotta get my guy off, right?
Okay.
Zion McCollum on day 3. I just love the idea of pairing this with the Marcus Jones draft pick, because Zion McCollum is the opposite of Marcus Jones, right? He's 6'2", 200 pounds, great length, great athletic tester, pure outside corner. So with tremendous upside. Like, they drafted Tyquan Thornton at receiver. The Tyquan Thornton of the cornerback group is Zion McCollum, or you know what I mean? Like, so if I'm the Patriots, I'm looking at it and I'm saying, we got a slot guy. Let's go out and let's get an outside guy now. I would love them to draft Zion McCollum here today. If we want to talk running backs, I do think that they're going to take a running back here today. Love Tyler Beatty. I think that's the pick. I think he's the guy that stood out the most to me when I was watching tape on all these consensus running backs. He was really, really fun to watch. I would go with Tyler Beatty. I think that there's a little bit of Dion Lewis to his game. I think he's got that shiftiness. He's smaller, but he's bigger than JJ Taylor. He's a little more in that Dion Lewis body type. And I think he's got great lateral quickness and just great contact balance. And I think he'd be a really fun player in their offense. If you had told me that Ramondre Stevenson and Tyler Beatty were going to be their running backs for the foreseeable future, once they probably don't pay Damian Harris in the offseason, I'm all for that. I think those guys are a perfect combination with one another in terms of their skill sets.
Yeah, no, I Spiller, to me, he might be off the board before 121. But if they get Beatty's James White. That's who Beatty is. Like, he's the next James White. Spiller could do a little bit more. He's going to give you some more between the tackle, traditional formation versatility. But if they get Beatty, I'd be tremendously happy with that. Or I mentioned him earlier, Treston Ebner. If they wait and they take Treston Ebner, I'd be into that. Can we get in the weeds now? Can we go in the weeds? Or
you're not going to say anything we said earlier about the punters. You're not going to give us one.
That's in the weeds. That's in the weeds. That's in the weeds.
All right.
So, but I want to start with the quarterbacks.
Yep.
Because between 2002 and 2018,
yes,
quarterback really wasn't a need for them in that window. You can argue maybe a little on the later side, but it really wasn't.
Right.
More than half of the quarterbacks they took in the top 150. They took Rohan Davies 74th overall the year after they won the Super Bowl, 2001. So I'm not sleeping on them using one of these 3 fourth-round picks on a quarterback. Brian Hoyer's year to year. Jared Stidham's in the last year of his rookie deal. They can frankly cut him. Trying to get a more long-term established backup. There's 2 guys on the board I really like. Bailey Zappi, Western Kentucky. I don't think he's ever going to be like a long-term starter in the NFL, but I think he's played a lot of ball. He knows what he's looking at. He's got a good build for the position. That's kind of what you want for the backup. If Mac's going to miss a game or 2,
right,
I'd feel comfortable with Bailey Zappi. Wouldn't start him, but I'd feel comfortable. The other guy I really like is Carson Strong from Nevada.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
He has more upside.
Do you know who Carson Strong reminds me of, actually?
Who?
And they liked him last year. I think this was kind of their plan B if Mac Jones didn't pan out. Davis Mills. They
I think he's more athletic than Davis Mills. He can move around a little bit.
maybe, but they both have similar level of arm talent. They both have really good arms. They both had injuries, but there are also flashes on the tape of really good tape when they were healthy and when they were going right
Yeah.
in college. So I kind of see a little from what I had heard, Davis Mills was kind of their plan B at quarterback, right? If Mac didn't fall to them.
I just think Carson Strong has a little more gunslinger in him.
Yeah,
I think
I
he's
could see
really
that.
got that grip it and rip it kind of style. So
Yeah,
interesting developmental quarterback candidate. I wouldn't hate watching him in the preseason. So that's quarterbacks. And I know people are going, Sam Howell was supposed to be a first round pick.
okay.
I'm good on Sam Howell. I'm fine on Sam Howell. And then later on, there's Caleb Ellaby, there's EJ Perry.
Yeah.
Okay,
I kind of like EJ Perry for them, honestly. If they're going
to go later.
Later, like 6th or 7th
Right.
round. Yeah. The reason why I like EJ Perry is because I feel like he has that ability to mimic a lot of the quarterbacks that they're going to face on scout team. I'm not talking about him as a backup quarterback, honestly.
Oh, yeah, no.
His athleticism's off the charts, and he's actually got that size. And look, I remember being in that locker room after the Patriots won the Super Bowl against the Rams in 2018, 2019, and how many of those guys on defense credited Brian Hoyer with getting them ready to face McVay's offense and to face Jared Goff. I mean, that was like the number one thing that came out of a lot of those guys' mouth. So the scout team quarterback thing is not a complete nothing, right? It's not a complete nothing. And I do think that there's an element to it with EJ Perry that he's got similar size and similar athleticism to a guy like Josh Allen. He's obviously not Josh Allen, but he's the closest thing that you're going to get on terms of scout team quarterbacks to somebody like Josh Allen. So I think that that's an interesting one too. If they want to take that view of, okay, he's going to be a long-term backup / he's going to be an athletic guy that we can put on scout team to mimic some of these athletic QBs we're going to face.
Yeah, no, he makes. I was more so focusing on that trend that they generally take their backup quarterbacks high. But yeah, if they go later, EJ Perry. The punters.
There we go.
Matt Araiza should be off the board by 121.
Yes.
We've talked about this the last couple of days. I think they're going to have Jordan Stout rated higher. I do. I still would be. They took Jake Bailey in the 5th, right? They have the last pick in the 4th round, 137 overall. If they're going to go punter, I think that's the pick.
Yeah, it's basically
137 overall.
Right.
I could totally see today being like running back 121, offensive or defensive lineman 127, punter 137. I could totally see that. Don't sleep on Jordan Stout. That's all I'll say. Obviously, I'm a big Matt Araiza guy. If he's on the board, great. I wouldn't be surprised if they take Stout. The other thing I would say is keep an eye out for coverage players. Keep an eye out for coverage players today. There's been a bit of an exodus there. It started with Nate Ebner a couple of years ago. They've now lost Brandon Bolden, Brandon King, Matthew Slater is year to year at this point, right? Some of the guys I like there, and this is now we're getting into the 6th and 7th round picks they have. Drew Hartlaub from Penn State ran a 4.2 4.40. Teams love him as a gunner. John Petreshin from Pitt is a hybrid linebacker safety who the dude just gets the football. He gets the football. He's fearless in contact. I like him later on. There's one other guy I would say to watch later on in terms of special teams. And I don't know how realistic he is now that they took Marcus Jones, but Dallas Flowers from Pittsburgh State in Kansas is a really interesting athletic prospect.
Pittsburgh State in Kansas.
No H. There's no H at the end. Pittsburgh State. It's a D2 school in Kansas. I think that he was an All-American kick returner in the NAIA. He then transferred to Pittsburgh State last year. He's led the nation as a kick returner. He's bigger. He's an outside corner. He's 6'2", 191, long arms. Again, great athlete. I think he reminds me of Gunner in that I think he would come in, he'd give you a kick returner right away, But unlike Gunner, I think there is some upside for him to contribute at his listed position down the road in 2 or 3 years. So, if they want a prospect, if they want a project outside corner, he's currently projected to be like one of the top UDFAs, and that sometimes happens with those late picks. You say, we don't want to risk him going anywhere else. I feel less confident about it now that they took Marcus Jones, but they may also look at Marcus Jones and say, you're not going to return kicks your whole career because you're going to be our starting slot corner. We don't want to risk you, right? If that's the case and they want another returner on the roster and then a guy who can maybe play some outside corner, I really like Dallas Flowers.
So a couple of people in the chat, just to wrap this up, talking, front seven guys, right? They haven't taken a linebacker. They haven't taken an edge rusher. There's actually been a pretty good run of edge rushers, like guys even like D'Angelo Malone went yesterday. So the edge rushers are getting a little bit thin in terms of guys that I really think could be like impact players at that spot that are still available. I would say the one guy that really continues to stand out among that group is Christopher Allen from Alabama. I know he had all the injury concerns, but he's somebody that I think that they could be into. I do like Jeffrey Gunter a little bit from Coastal. I think that guy can play. So maybe that's an option for them at edge. Linebacker, Darren Beavers, still there. Hasn't been drafted yet. I think he's probably one of the best players overall available today. So I'm assuming he'll probably go pretty early. But who knows? Maybe they have 3 4th-round picks. And something tells me they're not using all 3 of them. Maybe they do sneak back up into this round here at the beginning of the 4th and try to grab one of these guys that fell through the cracks, like a Beavers, like a McCollum, like a Woolen, one of these really top prospects that are still available. Winfrey, potentially, right. And then we'll see what happens. But I think that's an interesting thing to do here today.
I would just say in regards to like the edge defenders, I'd still like to see him at a defensive tackle, whether it's an athletic defensive tackle like Perrion Winfrey or whether it's Marquand McCall, who's like a true nose. In terms of like the defensive ends, outside linebackers, and we've talked about this, Evan, they've hammered that position in the draft. I think it's 5 of the last 7.
Right.
Taking at least one edge rusher
Matt Groh mentioned Cameron McGrone last night, right, as kind of like a holdover draft pick.
I just think between Josh Uche, Ronnie Perkins, right? These guys need to play eventually. And you're finally seeing it. They can't keep drafting guys and just having them sit for 2 years without seeing the field. I think you're finally seeing that correction where they're like, hey, we actually have enough of these guys on the roster. I wouldn't hate seeing them add if they're going to go that route, give me a true outside linebacker. Give me a guy who can maybe do some of what Kyle Van Noy did. I know it's Penn State, but I look at Jesse Luketa.
Yeah, right? I was going to mention Jesse Luketa's name too. Yeah. That's another one that I think could play, like you said, that hybrid role, right? That on the line, off the line, drop into coverage, and also rush. I think that those are that he's an interesting name here too.
There's one. Oh, that's an interesting one in the chat. And I will point this out. I have tight end listed as their lowest need, but if they really don't believe in Asiasi or Keene, they're at the point where they can move on from those guys. If they feel like
going Connor Hayward here, because I'd be okay with that.
No. Two of the top tight ends in this class are actually still on the board. Isaiah Likely from Coastal Carolina, who's like one of the premier athletes in this class. I don't know that they'd go with him. The other guy that interests me, who I thought, I'm not totally surprised he's here, but a little bit, Charlie Kohler from Iowa State.
Yeah.
The big guy. He's purely a red zone threat, but as the 3rd tight end to pair with Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith, a guy who is a really good blocker. And basically his 2 best skill sets. He's a really good run blocker and he's really good at high pointing the football. Having that guy in the red zone, he's your 3rd tight end. You take him here as your 3rd tight end. He's not going to play a ton, but he's got a little Tim Wright in him. Right? If you remember Tim Wright, the guy they traded for Logan Mankins, not a bad addition. So there's a million other ways I'd rather see them go, but if they go tight end, I can kind of see it. I could kind of see it, just they're going to move on from Asiasi and Keene.
Fine. Sure. All right. We just named about 50 guys, so hopefully the Patriots take one of them.
I have more on 98.5thesportshub.com too. So.
There you go. More on 98.5thesportshub.com. Nice plug there by Alex. So that's how we do it in the pros.
Also be on with Jim Murray at 11:35. So there you go.
There you go again. Wow, we're on fire. All right. And then tomorrow, today on the stream here on Patriots Press Pass, I'll be on for every Patriots draft pick on day 3, just like we did through the first 2 days. Going to be a busy day. They got a lot of work to do still, a lot of picks still to make here. So we'll have you covered right here on Patriots Press Pass live on air through every single Patriots pick, just like we've been doing for the first couple of days. And Alex and I will be back tomorrow to recap day 3 of the NFL draft for the Patriots and do the show like we just did the show today and just like we did the show yesterday. So I will have you covered right here on Patriots Beat and on Patriots Press Pass. 22 NFL draft coverage. Last day here today, and then we'll put a bow on it there tomorrow on Patriots Beat on Sunday morning. So we'll see everybody, and I'll see everybody in about an hour. Alex will see you all tomorrow, and make sure you go follow his coverage on 985thesportshub.com and listen to him tell Big Jim Murray to shove it. No, I'm just kidding. You won't.
Oh, I like Jim. I would say
I like
Jim.
him.
I like Jim.
No, I'm just joking. Anyways. We'll see you guys in a bit here on Patriots Press Pass, and we'll see you tomorrow on Patriots Beat. Thanks so much for watching, and tune in. We'll see you guys then.